Time is flying down on the south side as we are already in week 4 of Pitt football spring camp with the completion of spring scrimmage number 2 this past Saturday, along with Tuesday's practice on April 1st already in the books. That means they have Thursday's practice, another scrimmage on Saturday, their third, and 2 more practices next week before the Blue Gold spring game concludes all of it for spring camp 2025. Welcome into the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse. I'm Nathan Brysinger. Apologize, didn't get a video out last week. We were going to talk a little bit about the wide receivers. So today, we're going to group it together with the tight ends and talk about the overall package of pass catchers that Pitt will have at its disposal this year, along with some takeaways Pat Narduzzi listed from the spring scrimmage this past Saturday, along with some notes and overall observations and some recruiting stuff from Tuesday's practice on the south side. Now, let's get into that spring scrimmage. Notably, the offense was wearing the blue jerseys, which indicated that they won the spring scrimmage. Pat Narduzzi confirmed that in his press conference following the practice, and he talked about how much better the execution was this scrimmage, compared to that first scrimmage a few weeks ago, primarily dealing with turnovers. The offense only turned over the ball one time, didn't get a name on who specifically had the takeaway for the defense, but that's a big contrast compared to where they were 2 weeks ago, where they had roughly, I believe, 4 turnovers was the total amount. We saw Kyle Lewis had an interception, Javon McIntyre with an interception, a couple other players coming up with takeaways. And Narduzzi wasn't super pleased with the way the quarterbacks played in that game, throwing the ball, forcing some things. The wind didn't help, of course. The weather was a little bit of a factor, but a much nicer day, much more clean operation from the offense, and Pat Narduzzi was pleased with it. Some of the 2 touchdowns we heard about one came from wide receiver Deuce Spann going up and high-pointing a ball from freshman quarterback Mason Heinschel, who has continued to earn some praise throughout camp. Heard he in that first scrimmage, he completed roughly about 70% of his passes, and he didn't turn the ball over in that scrimmage. So he continues to earn some recognition and has been talked about a little bit here throughout camp so far. And then the other touchdown that we learned about was Julian Duggar, a 69-yard zone read keeper, and went down the field. Narduzzi pointing out that it wasn't just a home run, runaway type touchdown. He had to dodge some defenders, get through some defenders before he could, finish the play into the end zone. So hearing that sparked a little bit of a conversation with Narduzzi and some questions about how much is this quarterback room going to run the ball? Because you obviously have Julian Duggar who can come in, and Narduzzi has talked about that they can make plays and packages specifically for him and the way he can run. Along with Holstein, we know that he can run and move out of the pocket as well and does a nice job. Narduzzi noted about 8.5 yards per carry last year for Holstein they were looking at 38 rush attempts last season. So Holstein able to make some plays on the ground, and then Heinschel also can use his legs. So there was a lot of discussion just about this quarterback room. Is this the most athletic quarterback room we've seen at Pitt, at least in recent memory? It sure sounds like it. It sure looks like it. And Duggar obviously being able to take off and make plays. Holstein. So Pat Narduzzi's okay with them taking off. He's perfectly content with them scrambling. Now, you got to stay in the pocket, of course, and get through your reads. And then when things, break down, that's when you can take off and make plays. And it's a good thing that these quarterbacks have the ability to do so. It seemed like it was a problem in the first scrimmage that especially Holstein sounded like he was taking off a little bit too much, a little bit of happy feet getting out of the pocket. Now, second scrimmage sounded like that was a whole lot better, and then they were running when they needed to, when the pocket collapsed, and it worked. So Pitt's quarterbacks utilizing their legs is going to be a big thing this year, especially for Holstein, the toughness that he showed when running the ball as well. So quarterback play sounded a lot better. Deuce Spann with a really nice touchdown. He talked as well today during the press conference or during the media availability, and just talked about how he's been working on high pointing the ball. The receiver's been working on that as well. And Spann's a guy who stands at 6'4", the transfer from Florida State. Sounds like he's going to be a guy that, an outside threat, someone who can take the top off of defenses, but also can be a red zone type guy where you can throw up the ball to him. Now, moving right along, going into Tuesday's practice, the turnovers happened again. 3 to 4 turnovers, Narduzzi said the defense was able to force. However, instead of the offense sort of forcing those plays, it was more of the defense coming up with the big splash plays this time around. Narduzzi talked about Rashawn Murray, the Cal U transfer and the local Pittsburgh native, making a one-handed interception to start off the defense this day. So, heard a lot of good things about Murray so far, bits and pieces here and there, but watching him and watching some clips we've seen, seems like he can play some really tight coverage defense at corner and could be a really big piece of the depth of that cornerback room. Also, looks like Kyle Lewis added another pair of takeaways, at least via X that he posted. Now up to 6 takeaway stickers on his helmet. He just continues to dominate during spring camp and is looking the part as hoping to try to follow up that All-American season. Another linebacker that was talked about and that we watched during practice today, they had a little period during the special teams period, that they did some one-on-ones. And Cam Lindsey, during the blocking portion of it, one rep he put someone on the ground, another rep he just completely dominated them and stood his ground. And Jacob Bronowski, the tight end special teams coordinator, was fired up, came over, jumped up with him, celebrated with him. And Pat Narduzzi after practice said he's a guy that's coming along really nicely, really learning this defense, and really happy with Cam Lindsey's play so far throughout spring camp. So that's something to keep an eye on as this linebacker unit continues to fill out its depth, and him also being a local Aliquippa native as well. Now, moving on to every week and talking about every practice, specific units I want to look into. I want to talk about the receivers and the tight ends. Specifically, I watched the tight ends today on Tuesday. Got to see Jake Overman. We talked to him already. He is going to be the leader of this tight end room. He looks solid. I mean, he runs well. He runs smooth routes. Nothing crazy, but like can get into the soft spaces of the defense. That's exactly what you want. A little bit like Bartholomew, but he's also a really good run blocker. It took Bartholomew until about last year to really sharpen that up. Overman's there. I mean, he's a 6th-year guy, so he should be, but he'll be a big factor in the run game, but also looking to really take that next step. Only had 1 touchdown last year, had about 15-plus receptions. So Overman looking to take that next step, and he just looks solid all around from what I watched. Now Malachi Thomas, the backup tight end, really intrigued by him so far. He stands at 6'4", 235 pounds. Was a preseason freshman All-American last year. Now he didn't play a ton. He did in terms of like getting the ball, but he played in the run game. He played on special teams. He burned his red shirt, so he's a true sophomore per se. He just looks big. He can bully guys in the run game. He looks like almost an extra lineman out there. Now, the next part of his development is where he'll go in the passing game. How much is Pitt going to utilize him? I think he could really be a key target in the red zone with his size and frame. And Pitt, you'd think they'd look to use that. Pitt really ramped up their red zone production last year under Cade Bell in his first year. So Malachi Thompson, Jake Overman, 2 guys that really looked the part. Jake Renda, who's like that 3rd tight end, we haven't seen a ton of. He's been off to the side working out. Max Hunt, the freshman from Tampa, Florida, he's got a long ways to go. He's skinny. He's a taller, skinnier guy, but he has a long ways to go. He was getting coached up a lot today at practice. He stands at 6'4", 220 pounds, but he's just skinnier. He needs to put on some weight. So that'll be, some work in progress for Max Hunt. Now the receivers, talked about Deuce Spann and what he can be. He's a nice backup role, seems like a 3rd outside option with Kenny Johnson and Kateris Hicks. Kenny Johnson, man, he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to have a huge year for this Pitt offense. Just from watching him in spring camp, his routes look better than it's ever been, and he admitted that. He can run past the defense, make plays. Every clip we see Pitt post on their social media, Kenny Johnson's making a play, whether that's scrimmages, practices, and he's doing just that. Kateris Hicks, his speed is there. It's real, and that's something that the coaches are really excited about. His route running is really good. Haven't seen him, from what we've seen in practice, make a ton of plays, but we have heard that he has done that in the scrimmages. So he's a guy that should be that other outside top wide receiver alongside Kenny Johnson. So that you have Johnson, you have Hicks, you have Span. Andy Jean, watching a little bit of him, reminds you a lot of Konate Mumfield. He's a pretty solid route runner. He's younger. Span, he's in his final year of eligibility. He's got to make the most out of this year. Jean has a few more years to him. He's a redshirt sophomore, the transfer from Florida. He looks good. He at times he's stepped out and needed to come off to the side. So there's still a lot of development and progress to be made, I think, with Andy Jean, but still, Pitt has talked about repeatedly. Eli Holstein has talked about it. Pat Narduzzi's talked about it. This wide receiver room is much deeper than it was last year. I mean, last year, really, you only had Mumfield, Kenny Johnson, Poppy Williams, CJ Lee, and then he got hurt, and then Dejon Reynolds. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing someone in there as well, but that was really it in terms of the receiver room. But now you got those four guys. If Gene can really step into it and progress throughout the next couple of weeks and through summer, now the younger guys making could step in and make plays. Zion Fellerell has been talked about a ton. He looks good. Watched him make a couple of plays in spring. He's going to be like a slot guy, along with Tyreek Robinson, who has made some nice plays. Both of them have speed. Robinson has some really nice top-end speed to him, and expect him to return kicks for the Panthers this season as well. Now, moving on to some of the even younger guys. If there's one guy I am really, really excited to watch and see his future unfold in this Pitt program is freshman Tony Kinsler. He's number 17 for Pitt. He's out of Daytona Beach, Florida, Spruce Creek High School. He just has, right now it's raw, but he has the overall package. I mean, he's got speed. He can run routes super crisp. I mean, he's just a really good route runner. And he's got the hands. I mean, I watched him make a couple of plays where his catch radius is really good, where he can catch anything in his area. So he's a guy that can take the top off defense. He can maybe play the slot. That's primarily where it sounds like he could play. So Kinsler is a guy that I really like and what I've seen from him so far. Cam Sapp, another freshman for Pitt, on Thursday last week, saw him make a handful of plays. He ran a route where he took the top off the defense. We saw, I believe, 7 periods, the longest we've seen so far in spring. So we got to see more of the offense actually go up against the defense. And he made a play where he just went straight through the defense and caught a ball downfield, I believe, from Mason Heinschel. That throw came from then another one right in front of where I was standing. Caught it right over the defensive back, and was a ball from Eli Holstein. And he's also working in the punt returning game now, 3rd, 4th type option there. But he's another really good player that has a lot of raw potential to him that I really like. So Pitt's young receivers, there's a lot of promise and upside to them. Bryce Yates, another guy that's in there that can be put in there. But really, Kinsler and Sapp are the two guys that I've really been impressed with in terms of younger skill. So Pitt's receiver room really is a lot more deep than it was last year, maybe at this time. And there's a lot of options. And we're in spring. And when you're talking about that, that's a really good thing because you still have the summer and still fall camp. So when you have 5, 6, 7 guys that could play, not just 4 or 5, and we haven't even seen Raphael Williams or CJ Lee. They've been hurt. They've been there. They've been working out on the side, running. CJ Lee just recently got back into it. Poppy Williams has been there for the most part. You add those two in there. Now you're talking Kenny Johnson, Poppy Williams, CJ Lee, Deuce Span, Andy Jean. There's 5 right there. Tyreek Robinson, Zion Fellerell. So 7 guys, not even including any of the young guys, and Kateris Hicks, 8 guys. So, not sure if I said him there at the beginning, but still, I mean, that's a ton of options and talent to have. But now it's got to transfer onto the fields and onto game days. So that will be definitely something we'll keep an eye on, and something that's really promising heading into the 2025 season. Real quick before we wrap things up, talking recruiting, Pitt hosted a handful of guys on Saturday for the spring scrimmage. You can see the list that we had over on PittsburghSportsNow.com. Quarterback Angelo Renda, the 2026 commit, made his first visit. We put out a story on him, got to talk to him, really liked just about everything he saw in his first visit to Pittsburgh. Now, today, two important recruits that were there in attendance from the WPIAL. 2026 tight end defensive end Lucas Shanafelt from Peters Township, PA. He's being targeted as a tight end. This is his third time down at Pitt this spring. Was there for the scrimmage and was there for a practice about 2 weeks ago. So he continues to make his presence known down there, and Pitt is a very safe bet to land him. He's got a couple of other Power 4 offers. West Virginia's in there, Purdue, and then he has a lot of Group of 5 offers to his name. But Pitt, I mean, they like him. They're really pushing for him. He was involved just watching the practice, coaches meeting up with him. So that is a guy they like. He really likes Pitt since he was offered just a few months ago. And then the other guy, this is a bigger target and recruit in the class. Colson Gatton, the linebacker from Central Catholic. Not sure if Pitt's going to be able to land him. He's got a lot of suitors in his recruitment. He's got Wisconsin, he's got Penn State, Duke, Tennessee, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Louisville, Cincinnati. He's got a lot of offers. Indiana, Notre Dame, Michigan, just some of the other ones. Penn State is a team to watch for. Of course, his dad played there. Duke is another team. He's been down there, but also former teammate Bradley Gompers is down there. And then he was just recently at Wake Forest. He was at Virginia Tech. And then in February was at West Virginia. So he was there at Pitt today, which is a good sign to see that, Pitt is still actively trying to land him. 3-star guy, top 50 linebacker, top 60, 50 linebacker in the class. And Pitt, of course, they want to try to get some of these homegrown kids. Gatton and Shanafelt both there. So some important nuggets just to keep an eye on in terms of their recruitments. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse. Be sure to go check out all of our content from spring camp over on PittsburghSportsNow.com.